Hi all, and thanks for joining me to present my research problem, Activity 1, which includes a literature review and preliminary research question by myself, John McDermott. Just get straight into it. My subject area, which also includes my background, my career, profession background, is civil construction contracting enterprise. The specific topic that I've chosen is internationalization of construction contractors into emerging countries with a specific interest in Asia. So after I present the literature review, I will also include a proposed preliminary research questions that I'm proposing at this point in time. But just to get started on the first paper, which is the conditions of success, a platform for international construction development. Now, this presents an overview and update on a study which includes the conditions of success, what they consider the conditions of success, carried out in the 1990s to study internationalization of the construction industry. Specifically, they focused on who might be successful and under what conditions will bring success into the future decades. The methodology they used in the original study, as they included interviews which were conducted with 60 participant firms from 7 countries, so fairly extensive, relatively. This is updated now with the 20 firms that still exist. A lot of those firms were either merged or went out of business. So they've updated with the now 20 firms on the success of the adoption of that conditions of success recommendations, the original studies, the recommendations made by the original studies. The results of which, so a theoretical important aspect that emerged was that the distinction of a strategic model for North America and the relationship model of Asia were considerably different. Now, the Asian model is similar to what has merged in the European approach and is gaining in prominence over that of North American strategic approach. Now, the limitations and my assessment of this study is that more work may be needed to update the study comprehensively. Realistically, they just went back and asked what was the outcome of the adoption of those recommendations, and it's not necessarily an update of the original study, more an assessment of how it went. The second paper that I'd like to present is the internationalization of construction services, a comparison between emerging and developed economies, construction contracting firms. So the background theory and the key concepts, this is basically a comparison of internationalization process of construction contracting firms for emerging and developed countries. Obviously, they have split it between objectives, where they've used the entrepreneurship model as their basis, firm-specific advantages, where they've used the eclectic model or the OLI model, and the resource-based view model. The home country-specific advantages included the OLI, again, the eclectic model, and the diamond model. The methods used, using an integrated theoretical approach, the paper employs quantitative techniques using postal questionnaire survey from 81 firms and company reports. A comparative statistical analysis that was then complete. This is somewhat of a quantitative approach. At the end of the day, there were still questions, they're still subjective, they're not hard numbers. The results, there was little differences identified in terms of their objectives and firm-specific advantages, but significant differences in their home country-specific competitive advantages. And that actually included, if I bring it up here, it was with the developed country advantages, it was financial funding, sufficient supply of trained workforce and government's encouragement, whereas the respondents from developing country were a sufficient supply of trained workforce, multicultural staff, and response of foreign competitors. They were their specific advantages. Now, this is a good study and very useful for my particular topic, but it was limited to just British and Pakistani companies. therefore can only be a superficial assessment at best. It includes all sectors of the construction industry, which comes with advantages and disadvantages, which I will talk about in a second. The third paper I want to present is the Internationalisation of Construction Enterprise, an overview of the motivations, entirely focuses on motivations, obviously. Attempts to reach an overview consists of the motivation for internationalisation of construction enterprises and recommends a conceptual model based on Dunning's work, which was, I think, republished in 2014, but his work was originally done in the 1990s. The methodologies employed: research of international construction projects from 13 published sources. Qualitative content analysis was employed to provide an overview, so that includes a repetitive and consistent approach to the published resources. The results: 19 motives are specified and identified, and they're categorized in 4 aspects, namely the source of the motivation, internal or external, the pattern, traditional or emerging, response, proactive or reactive, and the objective, of course, the profit making or the market seeking, resource or opportunity. Now, the limitations and my assessment of this study is really further study of the deterrent factors of motivation is really needed. The research is limited to projects that are published in journals. To be fair, there's probably a lot of detail lost in those published journals. It's secondary source research after all, and it does lose some of the tangible aspects. The projects are mixed. They're public, private, and real estate. Real estate companies, real estate development companies, even if they're construction companies, have a completely different or a significantly different business model than other construction companies, and I fear that might have an impact on the results. So the fourth paper I'm presenting is the internationalization of New Zealand civil construction firms, opportunities and challenges in Asia. The background to this: they analyze key resource and capability demands required for projects in Asia, therefore the specific advantages New Zealand firms have. They examine the restraints faced by New Zealand firms. Findings are compared with the theoretical frameworks of entrepreneurship, the eclectic model, again resource-based view, the triple L, which includes location, leverage and learning, and the Uppsala model. The methods adopted: a multiple case study approach, including 23 interviews with 15 firms, a government agency and an industry body. The results: the findings support the existing literature on factors such as firm size, resource and experiential knowledge, although constraints such as networking, lack of knowledge, lack of financial and HR have increased risk and the appetite for that motivation. So flow of domestic work has made international opportunities less attractive to these New Zealand firms. The limitations of this, in my assessment, is that it's limited to New Zealand firms that are skeptical of internationalization are not motivated by lack of domestic work. That's clearly evident in the research. You know, these companies were quite happy to just seek out domestic work and not increase their risk to international work, regardless of the growth opportunities. Findings are not generalizable in a statistical sense due to the small data sets. Only 23 interviews were included, so it's quite limited. The fifth and final paper I'm presenting is the business networks and internationalization of contractors from developing countries. The background theory, key concept: they use the network theory. The paper seeks to examine the role and extent of business networks in aiding contractors from Malaysia to penetrate foreign markets. Methodology: the research adopted a mixed method approach, a postal questionnaire survey complemented with desk study and interviews. They were all used to collect data. The results: the findings show that business networks can account for much of the contractors' overseas achievements in terms of markets. They entered overseas projects, they secured, and market presence more they adopted. Although without their competitive advantage, the networks would have been meaningless. The limitation: again, a small sample population, although compensated by some interviews there. This would likely be very useful in my intended research. Preliminary proposed question, what I'm considering to start off with, what are the motives, processes and conditions of construction contractors successfully internationalizing into Asia? This will include many countries, not just one or two specific countries. How do these motives and processes compare between firms originating from Western culture developed countries to those from Asian emerging countries? And the reason I say is that there's specific advantages from both. How can construction contractors from developed countries compete in Asia with those from Asian emerging countries that have distinct specific competitive advantages, such as a shorter cyclic distance, more local knowledge, and a strong network? So that basically sums up my literature review and proposed preliminary questions. I look forward to your feedback. Thank you very much for listening.